everyone, for being here. Thank you again, Margaret, for having me. My husband, Abid, and I had a lot of fun last time and really enjoyed performing for everyone. So my husband and I perform music together, but I am also a visual artist, and that is kind of one of my core pieces of my identity is being a visual artist. I went to art school and received a BFA with an emphasis in painting from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. And ever since then, I've been working as a professional artist and also working in art education and specifically museum education, which is what I do now. So I am going to share my screen and then I'm going to pull up a slideshow. So let me just do that. And as I'm going through, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. And then I am really going to try to do my best to not be super lengthy with my words, as I sometimes can be. And I want to save a little bit of time at the end if you guys have questions that you would like to have a little bit of dialogue about. But otherwise, if something comes up as we're going, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will again try to respond to that at the end. So when Margaret and I were kind of planning this out, I was thinking about kind of all the different types of artist talks that I have given. And I have given an artist talk in a very, I guess, sort of secular sense where I'm just going through what my art looks like, what my artistic influences are. And I've also given an artist talk in a much more the context of doing it for a Muslim audience and kind of speaking a little bit more about the importance of art in the building of an American Muslim culture. So I wanted to do something different for this one. When I think about spirituality in art, I think that's a really ripe topic and it's something that impacts my art a lot. So I kind of started with this question of what is the role of art in our spiritual lives? And that's a question that probably all of you have an answer to that. And I would love to hear your reflections or read your reflections on that question just as we go through. And for me, it kind of breaks down into these three distinct categories. So the first sort of function of visual art, thinking of it as a tool for the act of remembrance of God. And in Islam, the remembrance of God is something called dhikr. And dhikr is something that literally translates as remembrance. And if you remember from Abid and I's session where we were performing music, that performance of music is also a form of dhikr, a form of remembrance of God. And then I also think of art as a tool for building a spiritual identity. And this is where that question comes in of how can art help us build an American Muslim culture? So as we go through my art, you will probably notice that there is some influence from Islamic art. And there's also a lot of influence from the Western canon of art, the Western European canon of figurative painting as well. And for me, that's really important to combine those two things because both of those things are important to my artistic practice and to how I kind of developed as an artist over time, and especially as someone who became Muslim when I was in college and when I was studying a lot of art. And then finally, and this is something that has become really, really big in my artistic practice in the last couple of years, is art acting as a means of conveying metaphysical truths. So for a Muslim, for I think all believing people, the metaphysical is just as important as the physical, right? We believe in metaphysical realities and metaphysical truths. And something that a lot of my spiritual teachers will say or have said is that beauty is the splendor of truth. Beauty is the splendor of truth. So what that means is that things that are very beautiful to us are also full of these truths. Things that are true are beautiful and vice versa. So just to kick it off, this is a painting that kind of combines these two aspects of physical reality of prayer and the metaphysical reality of prayer. So in the physical reality of prayer, we have a woman standing. She's raising her hands. This is a movement that we do to enter the prayer. She's dressed a certain way. She's standing on a prayer rug. But then we also have the metaphysical realities of the painting, being kind of this belief that we have that every time that we pray, and for practicing Muslims, we're praying 5 times a day at certain times of day. We have the belief that we are standing before God. Again, not physically, but metaphysically. It's kind of, our soul, our spirit is going before God every single time that we pray. And so with this painting, I wanted to kind of convey that sense of this divine light coming to you in prayer, this feeling of being in one physical reality, but being somewhere else metaphysically. And then all of my paintings also, I did list out the medium that I used. If you're interested in that sort of thing, that's written there as well. I use a lot of acrylic, a lot of gouache, a lot of watercolor. Okay. This painting is kind of a self-portrait. I put myself in a lot of my paintings. I don't know what that says about me, but it's fun to do. And this painting is one that I made that really focuses on some of the ideas that are present in Islamic spirituality. So in this artist talk, you're going to hear me use the term the spiritual path quite a bit. And for the Muslim, the spiritual path is the path to achieving closeness with God. It is the path to knowing God, essentially. And what we believe is that the spiritual path is something that we must do in order to have the right type of relationship with God. So for us, that means spiritual purification and really looking at the state of your heart, really looking at your inward state just as much as you're looking at your outward state. So for this painting, it's inspired by this quote here from Imam al-Ghazali, who was a really, really important Muslim scholar and philosopher and thinker of the late 11th and early 12th centuries. Your heart is a polished mirror. You must wipe it clean of the veil of dust that has gathered upon it, because it is destined to reveal the light of divine secrets. So kind of this idea that the more you spiritually purify yourself, the more you are able to reflect beauty, the beauty of creation, the beauty of the creator. This painting, I made this painting during Ramadan a couple years ago, and Ramadan is a time of really intensified worship, a lot of worship during the night as well, late into the night. And yeah, for this painting, I was really thinking of this idea of destiny and how, as Muslims, and I think most people who believe in God would say that God has a plan for us. I think that's kind of a common saying across religions, that we feel that God has a plan for our lives, and we don't believe that God is passive in our lives. We believe that he's active in our lives. And what that means is that, you encounter things in your life and you're not sure why they happen, but you believe that it's a part of your destiny. It's a part of God's plan for you. So with this painting, it's kind of this feeling of being really insignificant in the grand scheme of, this really vast landscape, vast constellations, and parts of your destiny or your fate are hidden, just like stars are hidden behind the clouds, or the clouds are sort of these trials that you go through in life, but the reward and the goodness of those things is like the stars that are always present, even if you can't see them behind those clouds. This painting, the title is in Arabic, so Zahir and Batin. Zahir is what is eminent, what is outward, kind of what is plain to see. And then batin is what is hidden, concealed, inward. Um, and when we think of the spiritual path, and when I think of my own spiritual journey that I've been on, it's really a balance of outward practice and then inward intention and purification. So the idea is kind of like, you know, is there any point of being, is there any point to be an outwardly practicing religious person if it's having zero effect on your heart, if it's having zero effect on the way that you interact with people, the way that you look at other people, if it's not having, if it's not like softening you and making you, you know, better, then it's kind of like, well, then all of that outward stuff doesn't really mean anything without the inward stuff. And for us as Muslims, the inner stuff also needs the outer stuff. You know, we believe that having belief within you is something that you have to put into practice with things like prayer, fasting, the way we dress, the way we can comport ourselves in public, all of these different things. So just with this painting, the idea is sort of that, you know, this inward reality that's inside of you is as vast as an ocean, and you can drown in the ocean if you don't have a ship. So the ship is, for me, it's the daily things that I do in practice. It's you know, it's the people that I call my teachers who know more than I do, that I can go to when things get difficult, get choppy in the waters. And then this is a painting that I think really calls to mind certain elements of American imagery, American culture. I made this painting sometime after I visited the Southwest. I was in Arizona and Utah, and I was just so blown away by the landscape there. Um, I really wanted to make a painting that was inspired by that landscape. And um, again, I'm kind of drawing these parallels between a figure, uh, you know, a figure playing a certain role in a painting, and then also what's happening in my spiritual life. So the spiritual path is difficult. It's not easy to constantly trying to be bettering yourself. Um, it's not easy to suppress your ego and to suppress the things that come from your ego, but the reward of navigating the path is like, you know, finding water in the desert, like having an oasis in the desert. And then I also just think that there are like interesting visual parallels of like, in this painting, the desert is, you know, representative of southwestern United States, but a lot of people have the misconception that most Muslims come from the Middle East, of like these desert climates. I loved painting those cowboy boots. I think cowboy boots are really cool, even though I don't really personally wear them. But yeah, just having these very like significant American cultural markers in a painting that is clearly about a Muslim woman, and then conceptually is about my spirituality and Islamic spirituality. This painting is kind of pulling on a few different visual references. The man in the painting, I don't paint men very often. I really tend to paint women because, you know, that's my experience as a woman. That's my lived experience. But the man in the painting is dressed in what we would consider like traditional kind of Arab or North African Islamic garb. He's going through this doorway, and there's like an entire galaxy or the entire universe on the other side. And this is sort of this concept that you can find the divine presence in really, really ordinary things. Something that a lot of my teachers say is that all of creation points to the creator. So no matter where you are, no matter kind of whatever like alleyway you're going down, whatever doorway you're going through, there are signs of God in all of the things that we see. This is a drawing, kind of a small drawing that I did. My husband Abid modeled for this. I took a picture of him and I use him as a reference essentially. But it's called There's No Such Thing as Chaos. And I really I struggle with this idea that a lot of people have, which is that the universe is inherently chaotic. I don't find that to be true at all. I find that there's so much order in nature, in the universe, in the world around us. And this idea of everything having a place is something that I think a lot of people find comfort in, but it's also incredibly profound to think that you are exactly where God wants you to be. You are exactly where you're supposed to be at this given time. So in this drawing, I was kind of referencing these shapes that are really common in like Indian Islamic architecture, including this tree of life motif, which is from a mosque in Ahmedabad, India. This is a series of small paintings that I did inspired by a quote of Ibn Ata'Allah, another really important Muslim philosopher and scholar of his time. And the Hikam is a book that is a collection of like sayings or like pieces of wisdom that he wrote. And this is one that I think about a lot. Some light is granted permission to reach, and some light is granted permission to enter. And what I kind of interpret that as is that you can be shown a lot of really beautiful and profound things, but if that isn't entering your heart, and if it's not altering you, then it's only reaching you. It's not really doing what you should be doing with it. You're not doing with it what you should be doing with it. So I'm likening it to these kind of like cosmic events, like seeing a comet pass through the sky, seeing a galaxy, looking at like a beautiful starry sky. You know, I think for me as a Muslim, like when I see things like that, it's really a reminder of how small I am. But I mean that in like the best possible way. Like it's a reminder for me of like everything that has ever existed or will ever exist is in the control of God. And I was thinking about this a lot with the solar eclipse that I was lucky enough to witness when that happened just a little while ago. And I've been using a lot of this imagery of space and stars and galaxies, and it's a lot of fun to paint. I really enjoy it, and I think that like you know looking at those types of images, it really makes us think about the whole entire universe and our place in it as well. And then that shape, that eight-pointed star shape, is really, really common, a common motif in Islamic art. And the example image is from Alhambra Palace in Spain. So this is the last painting I have to share with you all. And then I'm really glad that I didn't talk too much and we have like a good amount of time to talk at the end, have a discussion, ask questions. This is a painting that I made after I heard one of my spiritual teachers say in like a lecture of his that I was watching, you are related to all of creation and everything in the universe. You are the blueprint for it, and it is the blueprint for you. So again, this idea of feeling small and insignificant in this sort of grand scheme of things, but also realizing that you are special and you are where you're supposed to be in this wide, vast universe. And just kind of thinking of the macro and the micro and how there are things within us, within our bodies, that we see reflected in nature, that we see reflected in the universe, and then vice versa. And just how really profound that is for me personally when I think about it. I'm just going to show you one last image because this painting was directly inspired by this painting, which is by Frederick Leighton, artist from the 19th century. It's called Spirit of the Summit. So it's a woman kind of or the mountain and anthropomorphized as a woman. And I think that that's like a great example of thinking about how we're a part of everything else, right? Like we are a part of all other creation. It's all a part of us. Um, so that is my presentation. So some of the quotes were from, like I mentioned, kind of like these famous Muslims or from my own spiritual teachers. Some of the things though were things that I wrote about the art. So sometimes it kind of goes hand in hand, but I do find a lot of inspiration from like hearing people say or reading really profound things from people and then thinking, how can I translate that truth into something that people are going to like looking at, essentially. I also love to sit in front of art at an art museum and just spend a lot of time there. I think that's really lovely, really beautiful practice. I typically I have the thought first. I have the thought of how can I make a painting that expresses this thing that I'm thinking about right now. Sometimes I'll get kind of the imagery kind of comes where it's like, oh, I'm really thinking about the Southwest when I was out in the desert, or I'm really thinking about the stars that look a certain way in the night sky. And then I will kind of pair those visual motifs that come up in my work again and again, and I'll pair them with the thoughts that I'm having about things. So usually it's the thoughts first. And then with reading the Quran, I think definitely there are like images that come to mind, and the Quran is full of imagery. It's full of a lot of imagery of like natural landscape as well. There's verses about the oceans, about rivers, about mountains, stars, light, trees, bees, like so many things in the natural world. So that's definitely another thing that, yeah, I think when you're an artist too, like you just can't ever turn that off. Like you're always kind of thinking in like images, essentially. Great questions. Thank you for asking. I am on Instagram. My Instagram is my first and my last name all together as one. So if you find me there on Instagram, you can message me if you are interested in buying any of the pieces that you see on my Instagram. And I think all of the works are posted somewhere on my Instagram. I will let you know if anything is for sale. And then I think someone asked how I started painting. Really just like from childhood, like all of us do, right? Like everyone paints when they're like a little kid, and some people get more into it than others. And I was just always really, really into it. And when I was in middle school, I had a teacher, an art teacher, who really encouraged me to keep painting, and she really like saw the talent in me and told me like, you can be an artist, you can go to school for this. And so I did. And I don't always know if that has been the best financial decision in my life, but I was really glad that I had someone who really encouraged me from a young age. I really love everyone's messages in the chat. And I think just kind of something that I'll end with is like, if you feel like you're not sure what connection art has to your spirituality, I think art in and of itself is spiritual. Like the act of looking at something and thinking certain things, feeling certain things, having some kind of metaphysical emotional reaction to something is in and of itself sort of a spiritual experience. Like anyone who's an art lover, I think, could be like, yeah, that was a spiritual experience, like seeing this painter in person for the first time, their work in person or something like that. um, and so I think that thinking of ways to connect that to your own personal spirituality is like a really great thing to investigate. And that might look really straightforward. That might be like, oh, like religious paintings, like from my tradition, make me feel that way. But it might not be that. It might be like landscape painting really makes you feel that way. Like, oh, like seeing this landscape just makes me feel so in awe of the world or something like that. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone's thoughts and feedback. And it's really awesome for me as an artist. Like as an artist, the biggest thing you want is for people to find meaning in your work the same way that you find meaning in it. So I'm like really humbled, and it is my friend Shapla. Shapla. I'm so happy to see
Oh,
you.
so
Yeah.
happy to see you.
I am on Instagram. My Instagram is my first and my last name all together as one. So if you find me there on Instagram, you can message me if you are interested in buying any of the pieces that you see on my Instagram. And I think all of the works are posted somewhere on my Instagram. I will let you know if anything is for sale. And then I think someone asked how I started painting. Really just like from childhood, like all of us do, right? Like everyone paints when they're like a little kid, and some people get more into it than others. And I was just always really, really into it. And when I was in middle school, I had a teacher, an art teacher, who really encouraged me to keep painting. And she really like saw the talent in me, and told me like, you can be an artist, you can go to school for this. And so I did. And I don't know, I don't always know if that has been the best financial decision in my life, but I was really glad that I had someone who really encouraged me from a young age. I really love everyone's messages in the chat. And I think just kind of something that I'll end with is like, if you feel like you're not sure what connection art has to your spirituality, I think art in and of itself is spiritual. Like the act of looking at something and thinking certain things, feeling certain things, having some kind of metaphysical emotional reaction to something is in and of itself sort of a spiritual experience. Like anyone who's an art lover, I think, could be like, yeah, that was a spiritual experience, like seeing this painter in person for the first time, their work in person, or something like that. um, and so I think that thinking of ways to connect that to your own personal spirituality is like a really great thing to investigate. And that might look really straightforward. That might be like, oh, like religious paintings, like from my tradition, make me feel that way. But it might not be that. It might be like landscape painting really makes you feel that way. Like, oh, like seeing this landscape just makes me feel so in awe of the world, or something like that. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone's thoughts and feedback. And it's really awesome for me as an artist. Like as an artist, the biggest thing you want is for people to find meaning in your work the same way that you find meaning in it. So I'm like really humbled.